Alright, well, I have not had anything to eat today, which is appropriate for this self-help video. It's appropriate that I wouldn't have done one of the most basic self-care things before making a video about self-care and pursuing happiness and all that stuff. But this is for my Australian friend who often likes to come to me for my thoughts on how to improve her life, as if I'm the expert, right? As if I'm the expert. But I'm going to attempt to give my friend and anyone listening my thoughts on this recurring theme for all of us, and particularly for this channel. So the first thing I want to say is a point I've made many times, and it's a contradiction to the whole nature of me making these kind of videos and you listening to them, is that in some ways self-help as a whole represents the problem, right? It's the idea of the pursuing of the happiness being the problem. But I don't think that is always the case, in the sense that if you enjoy videos like this, if you enjoy listening to various people on YouTube talking about, how do you communicate better, how do you live a better life, thoughts on relationships and love and work and pursuing goals and all that kind of stuff, if that activity provides you joy, if that is an interest of yours, then it's okay. If self-help is not really an interest of yours, psychology, the idea of whether you might even call it the philosophy of living a good life, whatever, if that isn't something that is really a passion and interest, and you're just trying to feel better, much of the time, the things that would just make you feel better, right, are the things you've heard a million times. Right? Get into some better shape, eat better food, get better people in your life, right? And all those things are, it sounds simplistic, there's validity to them. It's not like I can write it off, right? If you certainly, if you eat McDonald's every day and you don't sleep and you don't have any friends and all the obvious things, we can kind of understand why life might not be going quite the way you want it to go. But what I'm really trying to put forth in this video are a couple similar obvious ideas, but maybe sometimes we need to hear these obvious ideas. And so one is, it's about pursuing interests. And if you don't have any interests, which I don't think is the truth, but if you've convinced yourself you don't have any interest, well, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem because basically what that means is, what is an interest? It's something that you engage in or engage with that brings you happiness, or whatever word you want to use for positive feelings of some sort, right? And so it's almost so obvious that it feels like it's not worth saying, but you do have to have interest. Now, sometimes I've mocked the idea of hobbies and the hyper-focus on hobbies, and I'm trying to understand, why is that? If I'm saying this, right, am I being a hypocrite? Am I contradicting myself? But semantics, the way people present things, can have a different feel, even when someone is maybe saying something that overall seems like the same message or very similar. And so what is my issue with the hobbies obsession? It's almost like when someone tells you to get a hobby or something of that sort, they're telling you to be interested in something you're not interested in. Do things you don't actually want to do. And while there probably is a time and a place to do certain things you don't want to do, sometimes it really is a good idea to take out the trash. If you have 10 trash bags, in your kitchen and you don't feel like taking it out, probably just got to do that thing anyway. I generally don't think we need to spend tons of time doing things we don't really want to do. And so I'm not saying to you to go get a hobby. I'm saying you have interests. Now maybe you've disconnected from those interests. Maybe it's been 10 years since you really were actively involved in things that interest you. But you have to find a way to get those back. Now maybe they've changed. Maybe you no longer like the things you liked 10 years ago. But I think there's a good chance that you do. Maybe now it's changed a little bit. Maybe the way you engage with a certain interest looks different as you get older. But if there's nothing that you're interested in that can excite you to learn about, if you're not learning about something, if you're not creating something, if you're not trying to get good at something, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to be enjoying life. Now maybe, I don't know, depending on the circumstances, you have just all these great people around, and even then you're probably engaging in some of these things with them, but maybe not. Maybe you just sit around and, I don't know, you actually there's no way to avoid, even with friends, right? You're going to be engaging with some sort of similar interest with them. But what I'm really trying to say is it's not this thing about watching these videos on narcissism or limerence or whatever the thing that's coming up in your mind. Oh, here's my problem. Oh, I got to look into my trauma, my this or that. Now, it's true that you can pursue these things, and occasionally you might stumble upon an idea that really impacts you and sticks, and the way you see the world changes in some profound way. Those instances are rare, but yes, they can happen. And if you have a very specific problem that you really need some hard-hitting, practical advice, sometimes someone might have something that you can kind of put in your toolbox of things that you use to make life more tolerable or enjoyable, right? Some people really are able to get through the day because they need that, meditation, their way of meditation that someone taught them, or their way of doing something else that someone taught them. But I think a lot of times we get caught up in the thinking, right? It's like, what I'm doing right now, is this helpful to me? And I would say, in a sense, no. The thinking in itself is at least pretty limiting as to the degree to which it's impacting my life. But what I'm really trying to do here in a sort of bigger picture sense is I do want to help people, right? That does make me feel good. It's something that I want to be good at. Now we can get in the whole thing about, is that because you're such a good person, or is it just an ego thing? Does altruism exist, and so on? And once again, that's something that maybe is an interesting philosophical concept that we might enjoy engaging in, in those sort of thoughts and debates and so on. But I just think we have a sort of misconception a lot of times that we can really just keep thinking and ruminating and even watching a bunch of these videos, and it's going to sort of dig us out of our problem, right? And so what am I saying? I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to say something that's not as cliche as eat a good breakfast and go on a walk, right? I feel like I've found myself to be allergic to that kind of advice because it's just so obvious, and we've heard it so many times, little things like that. But I think what maybe needs to be emphasized more in the realm of obvious life advice is the aspect of your interest. You have to find a way to reconnect with those. You have to look back, because all of us, no matter how much we've suffered or spent our lives in, so much of the time battling, escaping some sort of state of what people might refer to as depression, we can look back and think of, when did I smile? When did I laugh? When did I feel excited about something? We don't always need this sort of new tricks, right? What's the new trick I need to learn? What am I missing? Let me think, let me watch these videos, let me figure out how I'm fucked up. What is it? Someone tell me these answers. The answers are already there, right? When did you have your best week? In the past 5 years, in the past 10 years? What was going on? Which was your best year? What was happening? When recently did you have a good 10 minutes? A good day? What were you doing? What were you engaging in? What sort of thoughts even? We can't even, because even though I'm dismissing thoughts, what sort of thoughts were you having? What was your perspective of life when you felt good? The answers for your own well-being exist within the history, even the recent history of your own life. You don't necessarily need someone else to tell you how to do this, that, or the other. Sometimes, like I said before, yes, there can be practical advice to certain problems that we face. Sure, sometimes something resonates. We think about something in a different way, and that really sticks with us. Sure, these things are possible. I don't want to overgeneralize. I don't want to leave myself open to, this can be helpful too. Yes, everything in life, right? Any subject matter, we could find 10,000 research articles about any given aspect of life, for the most part, right? So that's the thing. The information is, in a sense, limitless on anything. So we could read and study and think. And yes, I think we should do those things. I think we should read and read. We should research and research, but not for the sake of trying to find the key to happiness per se. The happiness is in the action of the research about the subject matters of which we are passionate about. Pick up a book that you once loved, or a similar book that looks appealing. Engage with art, appreciate art, create art. What are the settings that you like the most? Do you like being in the mountains? Do you like being by a river, by a lake? Go there more. And then to remember, part of the problem with all of us, including you, my friend, is the beating ourselves up for all of our flaws, all of our mistakes, all of our imperfections. And there are a million different ways, a million different bits of advice someone might give you on this particular issue that pretty much all of us face. But one way that I would suggest looking at it is anyone you admire, whether it's a philosopher, an athlete, a scientist, a psychologist, a religious leader, whoever it is a very flawed person in ways that you'll never actually even fully know. They have made plenty of mistakes, many of which you'll never know about. They have plenty of insecurities, many of which you'll never know about. You're not special in the ways in which you're flawed. And what I mean by that is everyone has issues to one degree or another. And we can always compare and contrast, and well, I'm more this, I'm less this, and that. But what I'm recommending is sometimes you just, in some sense, you let it go. You let go of that voice that's ready to just beat on yourself. Oh, I'm this, I'm that. Okay, you can always get to that later. You can always get to that later. But it's not very fun. It's not very productive. And much of the time, the things that we tell ourselves is not very true. It's not true in the sense that we are unique in our shortcomings, right? Because that is sort of, I would say, implicit in the ways we criticize ourselves. Even if we don't say, oh, I'm unique in my fucked upness, it's sort of implied, right? Because if we accepted that pretty much everyone struggles to some degree with trying to be happy, with social concerns, with feeling insecure about this or that, about regrets and all that, if we can accept that that's a human thing, that that's a life thing, not an us thing, not a thing particular to us, you can kind of learn to let it go and not exaggerate how much of a big deal it is, right? And if you want to take an inventory of all of your mistakes that you've made or flaws, insofar as you can control those things, okay, maybe do a little bit less of this thing that you don't like about yourself. Do a little bit less of that thing, right? The goal being not to be perfect, but to be making progress. So, did a lot of rambling, maybe a little bit disorganized, but, in the spirit of trying to reduce self-criticism, I'll say, hey, this is my attempt at doing something positive, and if this video results in your life getting 1% better, then I feel like it was a good use of my time.